Hey, everybody. Guess what? We're halfway through the months of February. We passed George Washington's birthday. Never say President's Day. It's George Washington's birthday. And we've got a terrific show tonight because for the first time in many years, we have the director of the Manchester-Boston Regional Airport with us to talk about what's going on at our, the airport is just so vital, so important to our city and the greater community that we are in here. And most people, I think, that have the opportunity to fly Manchester think it's a great experience. It's nice not to drive to Boston. It's not to have to deal with all the tie-ups on 93 when you hit Route 128. And here is a friendly airport with lots of choices. But it hasn't been growing the way we thought it would. And we're going to talk about all that with the director, Ted Kitchens. And we're going to get to him in just a moment. But last time we were on, the most dangerous man on TV, Mike Farley said...
I wouldn't say that. It's the most dangerous hour. I'm not going to take any credit for any danger.
It's something called
I don't want that.
lib-splaining, and he explained that, but now I guess he's got an example for us tonight before we get started.
Well, a new feature that we're going to try to do where I feel that perhaps a progressive, we are the Progress Report after all, a progressive idea might be being misrepresented on the conservative spectrum of the political continuum, and so I am going to undertake to lib-splain, trying to do a play on words on that vulgar other word that conservatives like to use on Fox Network about guys like me. So I've got two options, and I think we'll start with a pretty easy one because it's been out there for a while. I'm going to lib-splain why a lot of people are experiencing a reduction in their income tax refunds this year. It turns out that the average refund as of this time of year is down about 8.7% from last year. And also the share of returns that actually get a refund at all is also slightly down. So what we see is that people are just not getting what they expected, what they've become accustomed to at tax time. A lot of people use their income tax deductions from their payroll as kind of a savings account, and then they expect to kind of get it all in one lump sum. It's kind of a forced savings.
And the auto dealers in there. George Washington's birthday
sales. They count on that money coming in for the down payment. They want you to take that tax refund right in and buy a new car or a used car. Yeah. In fact, about 3/4 of taxpayers last year got a refund, and the average was just under $3,000, which is a good chunk of cash to get all at once, and it feels like a bonus. It's really your own money that you've loaned to the government
right.
for no interest, but it feels like a bonus, and people do it. But this year, it's not happening. A lot of people who formerly got a couple $100 are now finding out that they have to pay, and so I'm going to lib-splain why that happened. You may recall that the Congress passed and the President signed an income tax reform, the largest income tax reform in generations, and claimed that it was going to help the middle class. And in fact, many people got a little bump in their paycheck. An informal poll at where my wife works figured out that folks were getting about $9 a week in their pay extra above what they had before, so that felt like a raise. The problem is, if you don't put the money into the account during the year, when it comes time to pay the bill, you have to get it from somewhere.
Under withheld.
So a lot of people are finding that they've under withheld. So that sugar candy, instead of a good solid breakfast, has come back to haunt them, and so people are finding they're getting stung by that. But there are a couple other things. One affects folks a little bit higher incomes, is what they call the SALT deduction, the state and local tax deduction, which has been capped at $10,000. So a lot of folks who may pay high property taxes, people in California and New York are getting clobbered by this. We here in New Hampshire, we do have a pretty high property tax burden, and it's possible that that's also affecting some refunds here in New Hampshire. But you're not getting any less. You got it in your paycheck over the course of the year. You need to do some tax planning, make some adjustments, talk to your HR department, get a little extra deducted beyond what the guidelines say, and next year you'll be in much better shape. So that's my lib-splain for this week, and I hope it's been helpful to folks.
I like it, Mike. You have some great ideas.
Well, hopefully we can improve it. You know, there'll be more topics, and as we go forward. And you know what? If it doesn't go well, it's our program. We can change it up.
Right.
But thanks for listening.
All right. I don't want to take any more time away from
not at
our
all.
guest because we're very, very pleased to have our guest here. Ted Kitchens is the director of the Manchester Boston Regional Airport, MHT, as we affectionately known it. How long you been on the job, Ted?
Just over 4 months. And it's great to be here, first of all. Thank you.
Just
to
over 4
Manchester.
months. I didn't know you were that new.
Yes,
well,
sir. Started October 1.
Well, that's exciting. And tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to Manchester and what your background in aviation is.
Well, I started off as a consultant to aviation after getting my graduate degree at the University of Florida, and started off, as I said, consulting mostly up here in New England, but also throughout the rest of the United States. And then after about 5-6 years of that, the wife and I decided to start a family, and the consulting thing just wasn't fitting right with the lifestyle change that we were having. So decided to try to get on the airport side, the owner side, as we call it in the industry. And got hired in at the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, just a tiny airport.
Oh, yes. Started at the
One
bottom.
of the busiest airports in the world.
The busiest.
The busiest, okay.
For I don't know how many years now.
I've tried to get out of that
All
airport.
right. I tried to make it better. I don't know if I succeeded or not, but I tried to make it better. So worked there for about 5 years, and then actually one of my clients that I consulted with became an airport director at another airport, and wanted me to come up and join him as his deputy director. So we moved to Virginia and was there for about 5 years, and then my deputy director in Atlanta became the director at Houston Airport System, and he needed a director of planning, and so they advertised for it, and I put my name in, and got to be the director of planning at Bush Airport, or actually at the Houston Airport System, and then rose up to be the general manager at George Bush Airport about 6 months later. Saw that airport through a lot of trials, Hurricane Harvey and the Super Bowl, where
Right.
the infamous New England Atlanta Super Bowl was there in Houston. So I managed through that facility, managed the facility through that effort, and then this opportunity came back, and my wife and I both she has family in Pennsylvania and very close to New Hampshire, and we decided to make the move because we just love New England and the quality of life that this region provides.
Well, that's great, and we're certainly glad you're here. 'Cause,
Absolutely, it's wonderful to be here.
and it really is, and I thank you for introducing yourself like that. The big news that's been on recently is that Manchester has not been seeing the growth it was seeing a decade ago, and year over year, I don't know what the phrase is, employments, passenger
yeah.
activity, employments have been dropping, and so I think that's probably where we'd like to start. What's the reason for that, and what's the remedy for it?
Well, I think the reason is complex. It's number one, just an overall structural change in the industry. 2005 to 2013, we saw 5 mergers and acquisitions occur in the industry. We lost airlines such as America West, we lost Northwest Airlines, we lost Continental, lost U.S. Airways, lost AirTran. So a lot of consolidation occurred in the industry between 2005 and 13. And the airline industry has also evolved over the same time to be smarter about how they grow and what markets they serve and at what capacity they serve those markets.
Yeah. The
And
days when you could get on a plane and expect it to be half full are gone.
they're gone.
And
they won't
you're
return.
lucky if you can escape the middle seat now
Right,
on any
right.
flight.
And they won't return. They have armies of people that are doing nothing but looking at the capacity that the airlines are putting into the market and how the market is responding to that. But they also have another army that is looking at revenue. And just like any business, you want to make the largest return you can off of the product that you sell. Mm-hmm. And that may mean I don't put it in this market, I'll put it in this market if I can get more money off of it. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the airlines have done. They've shifted the capacity around, and that's how they are becoming viable going concerns. I mean, they're actually are making money. Warren Buffett had a famous saying that if you wanted to be a millionaire in aviation, start with $1 billion. Because it was just a bad bet.
Well, that's the way it was for many, many years, and
for a long time.
they've now figured it out. though.
Well, you say figured it out. You use the term evolved. As an airline passenger, I would not use either of those terms to describe the airline industry.
Yeah.
I see it as a real devolution as far as from the perspective of the passenger, getting where you need to go in any kind of, I'm not even going to say comfort, lack of pain.
Right.
It's a tough
And I think that
I mean, I remember where people used to wear suit and tie and fly the Yellowbird
Sure.
to Florida. It was
Sure.
nice.
Yeah.
It was jet set.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I think that it was number one. It was the restriction of the capacity and the removal of options that people have had. Okay, when you're in an oligopoly,
But we had deregulation in
we did.
'76
And
that
that-
was supposed
and
to provide all this
and
competition.
It did. I mean, the competition that we had in the industry throughout the '80s and into the early '90s was wonderful. I mean, we were the leading free market. If you want to see the free market in aviation now, go to Europe. I mean, you have take your pick what airline you want. I mean, you got all the legacy flag carriers like British Airways and Lufthansa and Air France, but you got German Wings, you got Ryanair, you got EasyJet, you got Flybe, you got tons of airlines that you can choose from over there. They're the free market, and we're an oligopoly. We have 90% of the domestic seats in the United States right now are controlled by 4 carriers and their regional partners. And I throw regional partners in there because no one goes to skywest.com to buy a ticket. You go to Delta, and Delta tells you it's going to be SkyWest, right?
Exactly.
So to consumers, painted like Delta, it looks like a Delta airline, therefore it's Delta. So I put the regional partners in that number. Some people take the regional partners out, and the number is about 80%. But when you add in the regional carriers, it's 90% are controlled by 4 carriers. They don't care about competition right now. They've got their piece. They can set their prices wherever they want to set it, and they know that you got to fly them. And so your JetBlues, your Spirits, your Frontiers, your Allegiants of the world are all fighting for 10%. Alaska, Hawaii, they only have 10% of the slice of the pie right now domestically. So I think right now the industry is ripe actually for hopefully new competition, because whenever you are experiencing,
Is it possible for new entrants to,
I think so.
to
I think
come
so.
in and
But
really?
there's no gates available. Yeah, they
I
can't
got
land
gates.
anywhere. Well,
come to Manchester.
enough.
But
and that's
that-
really where we want to steer the conversation
right.
back. I didn't mean to
right,
get so
no,
general
it's,
about it.
It's
but
it's a great, because people need to understand that this industry is very dynamic and it's changing, and a lot of that has impacted Manchester to the negative. When Southwest came in 1998, it was a great thing. They were the low-cost carrier. If you could try to go on a Southwest right now, it's no different than Delta or United or American in terms of pricing. They're no longer the low-cost carrier. Their cost, when they came in the market, their annual quarterly costs were about $500 million. They're now over $2.5 billion a quarter in cost as an airline. Okay, so their cost, in just, 98 to now, to 20 years,
even
has
on a
more than
razor thin
4
margin, they can't keep those prices.
Yeah, it has grown by 400%. So they've had to evolve, and JetBlue is about to go through that same evolution. Business costs do one thing over time; they increase. It's just at what level or what angle does that line go? So I think because the airlines are now have shown that they are profitable and they can maintain profitability and they can maintain discipline in their capacity, they can start attracting venture capital. The return on invested capital now for carriers is approaching 7 to 10%, and it used to be historically 3 if you were lucky.
Right.
So
Amazing.
I think the venture capitalists are starting to see this as an industry that they can invest their money in and get a return that at least beats inflation. So I think it's right for new competition. Honestly,
Really?
yes, I think it is.
Well, to go back to Manchester, Boston and Regional Airport, and its declining employments, I had suggested to you when we were chatting before we came on here that it was because the fares were higher in Manchester. You said that's really not true. There were other factors. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, on average, and I had a great statistics professor that said, Ted, if you shoot at a duck and miss to the left and re-aim and shoot at the same duck and miss to the right, on average, you're having duck. Okay, so take averages for what they're worth.
Yep.
Okay, so on average,
Fantastic.
our fares are not that much higher than Boston. Okay, now that doesn't mean that you don't see higher fares. It all depends on when you book and how close to your time you book, when you're traveling. So all those other factors go into it. But on average, we're not that much higher when you look at the same airlines that we have and the same and look at those airlines in Providence and Boston and Portland. When you factor in all the domestic carriers that Boston has, like the low cost carriers, it certainly lowers that fare a little bit, but it's still nothing it's not out of the ordinary. It's not outrageous.
Not enough to
We're about $10 to $15
justify the aggravation of driving down there and paying
and what
more
we
for
just found
parking and
out
all
as
that.
as the worst traffic in the United States. I don't know if you saw that.
I did not see that, but I can
Yeah.
well believe it.
Yeah, it was
Yes,
the eighth,
shocked everybody.
the
I
eighth
think.
worst. Yeah, the eighth worst traffic in the world.
Yeah.
But
boy.
anyways,
Yeah.
Bring it on the train. Oh, never mind. Wait, that's another.
No,
So-
we're talking about airlines here, Bob.
so
There's a relationship.
on average, we're about $15 each way more expensive. Okay, so that's about 30 plus add your government taxes on it.
Well, I would think most
$40.
people would cheerfully pay that to avoid the
I
hassle.
would. I mean, just because the hassle and also the physiological effects that driving have on you.
Yeah, right.
But the real reason that we haven't grown is the cost that we charge the carriers, which we call in aviation the cost per enplanement, is the same as Boston and Providence. And we really need to be cheaper than them. Because Boston has a much larger, obviously, population within 30 miles of Logan, and Providence has a much larger population within 30 miles of TF Green than we do within 30 miles of our airport.
I see.
So,
So that's a real
if I were an airline and I'm making a maybe upwards of $10 to $20 million decision, which is what an investment of a one route into the market really costs an airline. It is tens of millions of dollars that they're staking on that decision. So it doesn't come quick and it doesn't come easy to make those decisions. But if I'm making that decision, if I'm the network planner, and I can have the same cost out of those three airports, I'm going to go to Boston
where the
or
market is.
Providence, because that's where the market is.
Yeah.
Exactly. And honestly, when Southwest was here, they weren't here to serve Manchester. They were, but they were really there to get Logan
Yeah.
and have that reverse commute up 93.
Yeah.
So they picked a lot of people up out of Methuen and Lawrence and Haverhill
And there was a great draw. The airport advertised it,
Yeah.
and to get people to come up. Well, I think that was about the time period when they changed the name of the airport to get
Yeah.
Boston in the name, so that clicks would bring it up. So.
Yeah, and I think the name, that's something we're looking at because I've heard this from other people that, the name is the cause of the decline. Well,
I can tell you that it's not a favorite of a lot of people in the city of Manchester,
Right.
but I wanted to ask
got-
this
it's
question:
gotta
Does
help,
it
though,
work?
doesn't it?
Did it work in
did it
getting
work?
more
Yeah,
clicks?
did it work?
I think it did because number one, it helps ground where Manchester is. My receptionist still gets calls asking where the loo is because they think they're talking to Manchester, England.
I get it. I do get it.
So
And
putting-
not to mention the other 5 Manchesters in New England. So I get it.
So putting Boston there, people
I
at least
understand
know
that.
where it is. And airlines really don't care what you call the airport. There are plenty of dual named airports that are performing remarkably well. Savannah Hilton Head being one.
Yeah.
Phoenix Mesa. They put Phoenix in front of their town.
SeaTac.
It should be Mesa Phoenix, SeaTac, and the granddaddy of them all, Dallas Fort Worth. If Dallas Fort Worth was named after the city it was in, it would be called Carrollton Airport. Who knows where Carrollton, Texas is? Nobody. So, but because Dallas Fort Worth is in neither Fort Worth nor Dallas.
Understood.
so-
No,
so-
and I think people understood the reasoning for it.
Right.
The computer age was not where it is now, but it was really starting to move. But
I think it
nevertheless,
was
we wanted it to
coincidence.
be our
Yes,
airport.
Yes, I think it was more coincidence than anything else. And if we think that's the reason, then the same year we open up our control tower. Maybe that has to do with it too.
Exactly.
Well, we're up against the break, but first we'd like to take a caller. We have a caller.
Yeah, we got
Robert,
Robert.
welcome to our show. Please come on in and give us a comment or a question.
Yeah, a couple of things. I'm wondering why ever we changed the name from Manchester Airport to Boston Regional Airport. I never agreed with that, and I think it ought to go back to Manchester Airport. And secondly, I'm wondering how much money do we have to expend on property taxes because the bulk of the airport is in Londonderry. Okay, Manchester tried to annex that land, and that's not going to work. And how much is it costing us? And why does it not remain 100% in Manchester? Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
A couple good questions. One
Well,
kind of
I-
coming in off of our.
I think we've already kind of talked about his first question about the name of the airport,
Yeah.
but the issue of the, about 2/3 of it's in Londonderry, 1/3 in
the
Manchester.
terminal
so-
itself is actually in Londonderry.
Is in
the new
Londonderry.
terminal.
So, I mean, that's an interesting thing, but You talk about that. Is there any
Well,
issues there?
I mean, we don't take any general funds, so if I'm understanding the caller's question right, I mean, is any property tax coming to the airport because of that? No, we're all self-funded. I mean, FAA requires that any dollar that is generated on the airport gets spent on the dollar or on the airport. So we are completely self-sufficient as an entity.
Do you have to report to the Londonderry officials as well as Manchester? I mean,
Well, my direct reporting relationship is to the mayor, board of mayor, aldermen, and of course the mayor. But I do have close relationships with the Londonderry.
and there's a lot of opportunity for economic development around the airport, of course, and
Certainly.
there's been a lot, but there's apparently more opportunity yet, right? And,
Yeah,
what
there
do you see
certainly is.
happening there? That would be mostly on the Londonderry side, I would guess.
Well, there's some down along Pettingill Road, but we also have some land up in the Manchester side of the line that could be potentially developed. It's owned by the airport, so the airport has to be the agent in that transaction, again, because of federal law.
Yeah.
But there are certainly some opportunities for us to lease some land. And any time that we can do that, that will help us generate additional revenue that then we can use to offset the costs that we charge the carrier so that we can improve our competitiveness in the marketplace against Boston and Providence.
Okay. Very good. You want to take a quick break?
Why don't we take a quick break and rest? We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot.
Just beginning. I'm
Yeah, I
trying to
know,
lip
and
explain
there's
this.
so
but I don't
much
know.
more.
Oh, another lip splainer.
Well,
Oh, my
it's
God.
working for me. I'm
Two in
telling
one
you.
show. My goodness. Okay,
Oh,
folks.
this is fantastic. We'll be back in a few minutes.
We'd like Okay, folks, welcome back to the February 20th edition of the Progress Report.
2:20.
220, yeah, 220.
You know, that groundhog said that winter was over, and yet it's probably snowing right now. It's going to start snowing in about 15 minutes.
Well, our guest is Ted Kitchens, director of the Manchester Regional Airport.
Oh, what, we got a
And
TV show to do?
And he will tell you it hasn't been too bad a winter for his crews. I don't think they've had them out as much as they have in many years past.
They have done a fantastic
And
job.
they do
always
an
have.
absolutely fantastic
Absolutely.
job. The
Absolutely.
maintenance of the Manchester Airport never closes.
Never closes.
Sometimes the airlines cancel flights, but
Yep.
Manchester Airport never tells
I
them
have
not
I
to
have
fly.
the best team that any airport manager could ask for.
Yeah.
Quite honestly. So.
But I wanted to go back to the general issue that we started with about the relationship between the three Boston area airports. You've talked a little about Logan. You've talked a little bit about Manchester and some of the cost issues you have here, and maybe you can tell us a bit more about that. But then we have TF Green down in Providence, which
Right.
is apparently seeing big increases in their employments. What have they got that we don't have, or what do we need to do to be in their growth mode?
I think one of the things that TF Green's done really well is they've been very aggressive in the way that they market and incentivize the carriers, and that's one of the things that we're going to look at doing is create some more incentives for carriers to look at us. It doesn't make or break the deal, but it can help. If we give some marketing money or something like that.
What
to
has
help.
what has not been being done that you would now do to do that?
I would create a formal incentive plan, that the carriers can react to. So if you're a new entrant coming into the market, you can get a certain amount of dollars towards marketing, or maybe we waive our terminal rents or our landing fees to that extent, so that we can help them get off the ground, no pun intended, and establishing themselves in this market.
So you're saying marketing to new carriers to
Yes,
bring in
absolutely.
new carriers. Now, we already have all four of the big ones,
We do.
right? So
We
we'd be
do.
looking for
for
some of
for
these new
Spirit or
upstarts.
Frontier or continue the conversations with JetBlue.
Now, let me ask this. What you're proposing is something that I see with my credit card company all the time. They will give a new applicant all kinds of stuff that I don't get, and I've been with them for years.
Right.
Do you have that same thing with the airlines that you deal with?
The federal law requires us to make it available to any
I see.
what they
Okay.
call similarly situated carriers.
Uh-huh.
So the new entrant, of course, is not going to be available to everybody. But if it's a new service to a market that we don't have service to now, and Southwest wants to do it, they get the incentive. Or if Delta wants to do it, they get the incentive. Or if it's the new carrier that wants to do it, they get the incentive. So it has to be eligible
I
to,
see. And
to
you're
everybody.
pointing out, I'm learning as we speak, you're pointing out all kinds of different areas that I hadn't kind of lasered in on.
Right.
There's not only getting the carrier here to Manchester, but getting existing carriers to fly to another destination
Yeah, exactly.
nonstop as
Right.
opposed to with a
Right.
connection.
So we have target cities that we'll put in the incentive package that we want nonstop service to. Fort Lauderdale, Fort Myers, maybe another frequency to Orlando. Of course, heading out west to Denver, St. Louis. That's an important market to the businesses here in the region. Las Vegas, San Francisco. That's a big. Now we're stretching it here, getting coast to coast, to San Francisco or Seattle.
It'll take some big planes.
But Oracle and PillPack with major presences here in Manchester, that's a significant market to them.
How about more flights to Washington National Reagan,
but
as opposed to we get lots of flights to BWI because
Right.
that's Southwest's
Well,
thing, but then it's a slog to get into
Right.
downtown.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing with Reagan is that it's slot controlled. So the federal government dictates how much activity could occur at the airport. And we have pretty good frequency right now to DCA. I've heard from the business community that they would like to have a late afternoon, early evening departure, because right now you got the 3 o'clock departure, and I think the next one is 10:10. Well, everybody and their brother wants that 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock departure from DCA because no one else wants to go to their hometown at 10 o'clock either. So, because of this federal construct in the sense of slot controls, of course, that now increases the value, demand-based pricing for those very coveted slots, and the airlines actually can count that as a revenue source in their accounting. The slots that they own. So
That's an asset.
It is an asset.
Well, since everybody's putting in a pitch, I'd like to put in a pitch for Myrtle Beach.
Myrtle
because,
Beach, yeah.
That's where my wife and I like to go in the summer.
that's a good one,
We
too.
would like a nonstop.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so we can incentivize the carriers like that,
Yeah,
and I
I
think
understand.
Providence has done a good job with that. And they've been successful at doing so.
Let's see. What was I going to ask you? come up with something. I just,
Well, Bob, I'm surprised that we've gone this far into the show and we haven't talked about a rail connection into the airport. You're well aware of the studies that have gone on and not
the
gone
Senate
on
bill.
to bring commuter rail up through the Capitol Corridor. Maybe to Concord, at least to Manchester, and if to Manchester, always with the idea that there's going to be a stop, because Manchester is one of the few airports in the entire world where people get off the plane and they can't catch a train into town. So do you have, I understand it's a different modality and there may be some competition on short routes, but do you have any thoughts on what rail might do to the Manchester airport?
I mean, I see it both ways. I mean, we're all for the study and the continuation of studying it. I think the rail will help market the city from an economic development perspective. It will allow some of the very companies I just mentioned that are in the mill yard or down in Nashua to be able to get some of the workers out from Massachusetts up into southern New Hampshire. So I could see it from a regional economic development perspective, but I would caution that, right now, we make it pretty easy for people to get to Logan as a state, through the bus and through the highway, everything else that we
Subsidized
do.
bus, by the way. People
We do.
often forget we're paying. We own those buses.
We do. And every time that a passenger makes that decision to go across that state line, that is economic development dollars that are not coming to the airport. So, for example, whenever you buy a ticket out of Manchester, there's a $4.50 passenger facility charge. The airlines like to call it a tax, but it's really not a tax. The tax is the $25 they're charging you on the bag that goes to their bottom line and not to the baggage handling system that is carrying the bag. So the passenger facility charge is collected by the carriers. They remit to us about $4.38, give or take.
is that the same for all the airports or no?
No,
Or is it higher here.
The enabling legislation allows you to go from $3 to $4.50, but most airports are at $4.50 because we haven't changed the cap in, I think, since 2001, if I remember right. So it has lost half of its value just due to inflation.
Sure.
And it's not indexed either. And the industry has tried many times recently to get that to be increased and then index it to something, CPIU or whatever it may be. But the carriers have successfully fought that back.
No, because they're going to put it right in the ticket price, and they're already
exactly, and they say it's going to hurt demand. But when they did the $25, did demand go away? It hasn't. So going from $4.50 to $6.50 or $7.50 is not going to hurt the demand.
Do you see any decline in demand? I mean, I look
No.
at the airline industry; it can only go up
the-
as far as customer demand.
Yes, it is limited by just the number of flights and really pilots at this point because we have a pilot shortage in the industry as well.
Speaking of that, it reminds me of airline operations, and one of the major carriers here in Manchester is Southwest.
Right.
And there's some issues with Southwest.
Yes.
Is it anything that airline passengers should be concerned about? Are you in a position to talk about it?
Well, I mean, we're working with our Southwest station manager and with our contacts back in Dallas with Southwest to make certain that we're taken care of. But people forget aviation is a system, so these planes are coming from who knows where. And if there's a mechanical issue, I mean, they're having an issue with their mechanics right now. It's a union issue. If the aircraft can't get fixed and it's scheduled to cycle through Manchester, and then we could see a problem. We haven't seen any of that happen right now. Our cancellations today were 100% due to the snow in BWI and also at Washington Reagan. So we haven't seen any problems yet, but it's something we're certainly keeping an eye on. But going back to that PFC, so every time that passenger gets on the bus or on the rail or whatever it may be, and they go to Boston, Boston's getting that PFC. So the passenger facility charge has to be used
Passenger service.
at the facility that's collected at. So it goes to repave our runways, to maintain our terminal building, to expand the terminal building if we needed to expand it, which we don't right now. To pave our roadways, whatever it may be. It has to go. There are federal rules around how we can apply that money, but it is our money. So every time you step across the line, you're sending that money to Massport instead of Manchester, which then takes money out of the local economy that doesn't multiply throughout the economy, and it could affect the grocer on the corner or your dry cleaning because people in the construction industry don't have jobs to work on, so there's a deflation in the local economy. So
And that's
I
all
think
locally generated too.
It is.
You're not bringing
It's
someone in from
no, it's-
California.
It's
to
demand that
repay.
we're generating as a state, but we're giving it to Massachusetts, and so that's something that we need to make certain that whenever we talk about rail, we consider that. That the trains do go both ways, and I don't have a problem with people getting to the airport. I have a problem keeping the people that are around the airport using the airport. That's my problem. I mean, we have 80% of the tickets that are bought within 25 miles of the airport are going out of Logan, and that's a staggering number.
What was that last?
80% of the tickets bought within 25 miles of the airport. So essentially, the state line up to Concord,
Yeah,
and then Epping,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, are going out of Logan.
And why is that again?
Well, I think there's a perception that there's a nonstop flights out of Logan, and you can fly nonstop. But what people forget to factor into that is the hour and a half that you have to drive to get to Logan.
I never forget that. Boy.
And then the
I
2
never
hours
forget
that you have to get to Logan before you get on the flight, and then the hour and a half back after you land.
Yeah, and the inconvenience to the family member that
inconvenience.
has to
Boy,
come down and get you.
I can't believe that people don't figure that when they're making their purchases, because I sure do.
Yeah, and as we were talking before we got on air, we offer 29 daily flights to 10 different hubs and 150 connecting cities, one stop out of Manchester. And I know people don't want to make the stop, but over 50% of our connections are less than 90 minutes in length. Mm-hmm. That's just enough time to A, get off the airplane, B, stretch your legs, C, use the restrooms, get something to eat, and then you're back on the airplane and you're gone
Right.
on your next flight. And that hour and a half would have been sitting in your car. So instead of spending it in Detroit or
Yeah,
in
you got
BWI
me. You
or
got
in
me.
Philadelphia enjoying a beer and pretzel, you're sitting there looking at taillights in front of you on 93.
Exactly.
So
JetBlue. We've heard about the history, as I remember it. Southwest came here, and Manchester just boomed because Southwest at that time was low fare.
it was the low fare carrier.
And we had them, and Logan didn't. Mm-hmm. Then they went down to Logan, and then there was JetBlue.
Right.
And lots of people said, and I think your predecessors said, we'd love to have JetBlue here. And it never happened. Is there still a chance?
There's always a chance. We're still talking to them. We're talking to all the carriers out there. There's only 8 of them or 9 of them that we can really go after. And we got 4 already. So, again, like I said earlier, the galaxy of carriers has really shrunk.
But you seem to
because
think
of the
there's
mergers.
room for new emergents.
There is, and that takes some time.
Yeah, but you don't
And-
start an airline
No,
tomorrow
no,
and
and
have it up
the-
and running.
Well,
The-
yeah,
the,
sure.
The largest barrier to entry has always been capital to start an airline. If you could crack that nut, then you had to go through the federal regulatory process. But now, hopefully, that capital issue is starting to assuage itself a little bit. But you still have very high hurdles to get a carrier actually certified through the federal certification process. So it's still very difficult to start.
Is there does the physical layout of the airport or the length of the runways, is that any constraint at all whatsoever?
We have beautiful facilities, and the capabilities of our runways and the capabilities of our approaches are wonderful.
Yeah, that was a military air base
Yeah.
Originally, and from what I heard, when they began converting and building the new terminal and everything,
Right.
they were bragging about the thickness of the runway and how.
Yep. I mean,
and then with the new extension, where
Well, I was thinking more of the length of the runway. Could we aspire someday to have international flights flying to Europe and Asia from Manchester?
well, I wanted to talk about international, but we're at the point for our next break. Do you want to take a quick break?
If you say so.
Well, it's
Okay.
not an order, Bob, but I guess they
It's our
flashed
tr-
the
it's
40
our-
minutes on the screen. I thought we'd stick to protocol.
Okay, we'll stick to protocol. All right. everybody. We're having a dandy time here and learning lots from Ted Kitchens, our 4 months on the job, new director of the Manchester-Boston Regional Airport. And it's been a long time since we talked about the aviation air transport in Manchester, Greater Manchester, and we're certainly pleased to be doing tonight, and we're getting a heck of a lot of good information, and we got a lot more to go.
But before we do that, we got David on line one.
We hope. David,
We
are
hope-
you there?
David, you still there?
Yes. Hi, Bob. Hi, Mike. I have a question for the airport director.
Sure. Have at him.
Hi, Dave.
I'm wondering if you guys can allocate any funds for the north part of Perimeter Road that's right off the Triangle Wall off of South Willow Street and right below where the hotels are. It's just atrocious.
I would agree with you, sir. I drive that route a few times a week, and that is something that is something that's on our radar to try to fix that. So
Now, would that be under the airport authority to fix that, or the city of Manchester?
I believe that's going to be Manchester. So we're
Do you guys
researching
have
that
any
right
leeway in
now.
that? Because it's just horrible. Someone visiting the airport or coming into the airport for the first time, they're probably going to scratch their head and go, "Why are we here?"
I would agree, but I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Anything else, Dave?
That's it.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks
Thanks
for
for
the call.
calling. It sounds like a pertinent point.
Yes, it is.
You know,
Okay.
I'm going to take an opportunity live on the air because I want people to know about this. I do want to make you aware, if you aren't already, of the historic building right down in that Willow Street Perimeter Road area. The Harvey building that is right next to
one
the
Harvey.
fire
Yep.
station.
Yep.
We had worked with the previous airport director to preserve that from the
Yep.
wrecking ball,
Yep.
and I hope that you will kind of keep it on your radar in an effort to keep that
We've actually
as a viable property.
Yeah, we have. We actually invested some of our capital to help fix that up to try to lease it back out.
And I sure saw that,
So-
and I for one appreciate it.
Yes, yeah, and we actually have some interest in that property. So
That's good news.
so that's good. So
Yeah, you've got some historic things there. The old
The Ammon Terminal.
the Ammon Terminal, which is now the Aviation Museum. It's a
well, that was the original terminal. But
that was the original
yeah,
terminal, the
right,
Ammon Terminal.
right.
What's happening with that?
Well, we have some tenants in there right now. National Flight Simulator. We got Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. We got some folks that are in that building right now.
Because we have quite a lot of history with our airport here. You know,
And one of in my vision in that whole area right by the Amen Center is really to help crack the code of aviation workforce development. We mentioned earlier that we have a pilot shortage. We have shortage of airframe and power plant mechanics. We have a shortage of flight attendants. So any kids listening out there, if you want a good industry for the next several decades, aviation is probably going to be it. But aviation has historically had a knee-jerk reaction to workforce development because, I mean, let's face it, we're type A personalities, right? I mean, we're only 115 years removed from Kitty Hawk as an industry. And so we don't have the tried and true career pathways that medicine and law and philosophy have because they've been around for thousands of years. So aviation has always just kind of reverted back to the tried and true of if we have a pilot shortage, we're going to scoop up into the military and pick up some of the pilots.
I was going to ask that. I mean, we've
but the
had
military is having a hard time finding pilots as well.
that answers the question. Then, doesn't
So
it?
there's a systemic problem at this point in the industry that we're trying to fix. And Southern New Hampshire with Daniel Webster, University haven't bought that asset after it unfortunately went bankrupt.
They had a long-standing
They were down in
airline
Nashville.
pilot program
Yep.
down there.
And so that's a good thing. And we're hoping to take that whole area where the Amen Center is and turn that into an aviation workforce development where we can get very much what the governor has mentioned in his programs about trying to get STEM programs early on into a career, and then you can work from the STEM program into the university with some credit, and then you can walk right into a job.
Oh, and within a mile or two of that area, you have the MST, which
You
is
got MST,
ideally
yep.
suited for
Yep,
something
it
like
certainly
that, for a pathway.
Yep. And one of the critical needs in aviation really is cybersecurity.
No kidding.
It's critical everywhere, but it's critical in
Sure is.
aviation. You see what happened in Atlanta when they took control of FIDS, the Flight Information Display System, and it wreaked havoc for a day or two. It costs the airlines a lot of money, and so cybersecurity is a real of real interest to aviation. And of course, we have the University of New Hampshire cybersecurity program. We got the cybersecurity program up at Dartmouth. that are top notch, and you have Oracle Dyn, you got Raytheon, you got Raymarine, you got a bunch of people that are in the region that are interested in that cybersecurity market.
It's got to be worrying you every day.
It does. It does. That and drones. Honestly, I think drones will be the next thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I think we got another call, Bob.
Okay,
we're
we got-
generating a lot of interest on the show tonight.
Hey, Eric, if this is you, we're happy to have you with us. You go right ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the show.
Thanks.
We love that.
Your folks' thoughts on the Green New Deal. I know this gentleman is working for the airport, and we have this ridiculous Green New Deal coming out saying they're going to get rid of airplanes in the very distant future. But it's getting looked at right now and getting voted on now. Just want to get your thoughts, and hope I can stir up the soup a little bit. And I really enjoy your show. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Very interesting, and I have to say that I had an alternate libs plane that was going to talk about the Green New Deal, so we'll have to do that next week.
Next week. There'll be another show next week, folks. There always is.
Right.
But that's an interesting question. For
It
a while, your
the industry
your
grow?
airport was for quite a while had the largest solar facility in the state of New Hampshire on top of your
On
garage.
top of the garage, yep.
I don't think it's the largest anymore, but I'm sure it's still helping out.
It is.
And
it is.
what else are you doing? I don't know what we can do about airplanes. That seems like a real tough one. It's hard to imagine electric airplanes. Electric cars, maybe. Well, yeah, electric cars, yes, but the airplanes, not so much. But
No, you can work on improving emission controls. I mean, there's science
Yeah.
that can be
And
applied.
aviation and the global carbon footprint is less than 2%. People look at the contrail, they think that's,
oh, really?
carbon.
That's all it is?
Yeah, but it's not. It's water.
Agriculture is 14%.
Right. So I think it's just it's there for shock value. I hope,
Yeah.
that no one is really contemplating about undoing aviation, because, and I ask all your readers and listeners to just look around your house. What part of your house has not been touched by aviation somewhere in the supply chain of a product? Look at you don't have to just roll over in your bed and look at your nightstand. I mean, chances are you got things from different continents sitting right there looking at
I
you.
pulled 2 packages off my back steps this afternoon.
Right.
that both, I'm
Yeah.
sure, arrived in an airplane to
Somewhere
Manchester.
at some point in that product's supply chain and life cycle, it was touched by aviation.
Yeah.
And there's very few industries that have made that type of impact in that 115 years of our existence. Think of our lives without aviation right now. It would be next to impossible to do
Right,
so.
right.
So.
It's amazing. I mean, I have a son living in London, and it's bad enough he's that far away, but at least I can get to see him with a 5-hour flight. And
Yeah. I mean, it's
imagine if it was a century ago.
And there's a wonderful
a
movie
sea
out
voyage,
there. There's a wonderful movie out there. If anybody wants to watch it, if they're aviation enthusiasts like I am, and I've unfortunately asked my family to sit down and watch it a few times, just so they understand what Dad does. Called "Living in the Age of Airplanes." It's a National Geographic movie, and it's for the ladies out there, it's narrated by Harrison Ford. I mean, who doesn't like Han Solo? And it's got James Horner.
enthusiastic pilot,
Yeah,
I believe.
Exactly, he was or is. And then James Horner, who did Titanic.
Oh, yeah.
One of the greatest movie score producers, if you ask me, of all time. And unfortunately, he did die in an airplane accident a few years ago. They did this, and it's a film by Brian Twilliger, and it's National Geographic, so it's got the wonderful cinematography in it.
Mm-hmm.
But they talk about how aviation really, when you there's a saying in aviation that a mile runway can get you the world, a roadway gets you down the road a mile. But once you lift off the ground, you are free to roam about the country, to borrow Southwest tagline. You are not fixed by a guideway like a road or a rail or sea. Mm-hmm. Aviation is the mode that conquers all different modes of travel. But it talks about how it took 20,000 plus years for humankind to make it from the southern tip of Africa up across the land bridge and down the Rockies and down the Andes to the southern tip of South America. But now it's an 8-hour flight, and we take it for granted.
Oh yeah.
And instead of, so they say we've gone from a migration to a vacation because of aviation.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about it, and now people complain about the fact that the food's not good. And they
Right.
have to
Food, they have
sit in
food.
the middle
I haven't
seat,
seen
and
food
they-
on an airplane
and-
since I was 20 years old.
and forget about the fact that it's a miracle. they
It
can
is a
get-
miracle, Bob, but I still reserve my right to complain. I think that there is a floor that they have gone below, and I do think that part of the industry thinking should be more customer care. It's a service, after all.
It is.
You don't take anything home
It
with
is.
you when you get off the airplane.
Right.
It's a service.
And I think that will eventually come back.
I want to give you a little chance. We haven't got a whole lot of time here, and I thought this hour would go by and fast, and boy, is it. But I want you to talk a little bit about the things that are happening at the airport that I think maybe people don't know about. You mentioned one called, what'd you call it, Fast Pass?
Yeah, Fast Pass. So,
I mean, that sounded really interesting. I had never heard of it.
Yeah,
Tell about that, and if there's others, tell us about
Sure.
that.
Fast Pass is a frequent parker program that we have at the airport. We've had it for 4 years now. That you can accrue points for every dollar you spend on parking, you get 1 point. And then after a certain number of points, you can redeem that for free parking at the airport. Just go on to our website, www.flymanchester.com, and you can sign up for Fast Pass there. It'll take you 5 minutes. There's a nominal fee just to set you up in our database and get the actual card. But it also allows you to card in and card out. So you link your credit card to it. So instead of pushing the button to take a ticket, you tap your Fast Pass in, the gate opens up, and then when you go out in the parking garage or out the Lot C, tap the Fast Pass, the gate goes up. You don't have to worry about the cashier or changing money or anything of that
This
nature.
probably won't do much for the people that fly for vacations 2 or 3 times a year, but business travelers, perhaps?
Business travelers, we have impressive number of people that are Fast Pass customers, and we're actually looking at maybe revamping that program to allow you to accrue points differently and then use the points differently. Some people may not want to have free parking; they may want to have 10% off or 20% off at the concession or whatever.
Yeah.
So there may be different ways that we can allow the passenger to use those points.
Well, that's interesting, and I just did not know about that.
Yeah.
Are there other such programs that you can tell us about?
Well, other than the incentive program, we're looking at retooling our marketing. We've actually increased our marketing budget for this coming fiscal year, starting in July. Hopefully, people are seeing our advertising right now on WMUR. We have a commercial running on that station, and we also have some our billboards around the community as well. And we're also are looking at joint marketing with other airports. So as part of that incentive package, like I mentioned, you can get some marketing money. Well, all airports have these things. So when United started the new route to Dulles, well, that was a new route that Dulles had incentivized. Anybody who started a new route could get marketing money from Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, which runs Reagan and Dulles. So we approached them and they said, yeah, we'll throw some money in your market because we want people to go up to New Hampshire because they needed to be successful in Dulles, just like we needed to be successful here. So there's a billboard sign, if you catch it at the right time at the stoplight there on South Willow Street, right by Cork Automotives and BJ's in that area. There's a sign if you're going north on South Willow that has an advertisement there that's actually paid for by Washington Dulles, but it's advertising the route between Manchester and Dulles. So we're entering into cooperative marketing agreements with other airports to do that.
And likewise, I think that a reciprocal arrangement could be made where you'd advertise
we do
at a destination.
Yeah, we have
fly to Manchester.
We have pop-up banners at Dulles Airport now saying fly to Manchester, come see the state, and we're actually improving our relationship and working closer with the state tourism agency as well to have them promote.
You're a natural gateway for what they're trying to do,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, I can't
Yeah.
imagine you wouldn't be working hand in glove with them.
So we're in those fly-in markets because traditionally the state has marketed in drive markets, but we're asking them to help market in those fly markets as well, so that in Chicago or in Charlotte, they're seeing New Hampshire in the terminals.
Mr. Kitchens, we could go on for another hour,
Absolutely.
but this hour is...
My wife always
we
tells
can't.
me, don't bore people because I could talk about aviation for hours.
Well, I think you talk about it with passion and a breadth of view that I think is really wonderful, and I really, really appreciate your coming down. I hope you'll come back
Absolutely.
before too
Anytime.
long, because this has been terrific.
Yep.
And
We
I
did
think
take
we've learned a
too
lot.
big of a gap between airport shows. I think we need to do the airport show a little bit more frequently.
Yeah, I think we should, because it's such an important part of our
It is.
economic life here and our in our life generally. And so it's just terrific, and I thank you, and I'm
My
glad
pleasure.
you're here, and I wish you great success.
great to be here.
And it's really great. And we'll be back next week with another edition of the Progress Report. Haven't got the guest yet, but we'll post it as we did this show. And again, thanks to Mr. Kitchens for joining us. Have a great evening, folks.